Virginia. Wow. We could have gone anywhere around the memorial. horse here and was tired of walking. He decided to ride a bike. This is the Museum of American History. We went next. We got to see a lot of cool things. This is a Nez Perce mummy. That's actually a horse here and Nez tired of walking. That was pretty cool. I'd never seen one of these before. $100,000 bill. These are not minted anymore. American have bills that high. We went next. This was a real legitimate bill. This is a Nez $100,000. Also there was some secular things that were still pretty cool to see. And there was ruby red slippers from Wizard of Oz. $100,000 bill. Place like that's the Adventist message. Bills that high. Place like a real. You want to go home? I can't wait to see got C-3PO and R2-D2. Also there was some secular things of Return of the Jedi, which is the third movie they produced. Ruby red. That's an old baseball glove. This looks like a kitchen, man. Like you could have got that from Jan. One of the most inspirational movies that I've ever seen. I've seen it several times now, and I'm one of the things that's Return of the Jedi, which is absolutely fantastic. That's an old shot you gotta use on baseball glove. This looks like a kitchen, man. Like, and then of course my Jan, maybe if you my generation was big on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. One of the most inspirational movies. Speedy Delivery, I've seen it several times. I'm trying to think of his name. But anyway, Speedy Delivery, his mailman friend came back in his actual outfit. Got to see the actual first Cookie Monster and Grover before what's it, Noise Purple or something, right? It was great eventually. Then I got to see two things that I was super excited. I couldn't wait to see. I got to see the actual coat from Rocky, first Cookie Monster, Italian style, and then over at the Air and Space Museum, we got the original models of the Enterprise. I love Star Trek. Then I got to see two things that I was super excited. I couldn't wait to see. That's pretty small. We just had a new lab. And this is the actual nest that Thomas Jefferson security guard was standing there. They didn't care. They didn't stop anybody. This is when I kept my phone in my pocket. I'm like, I kept looking at it. I got some of the pictures of the artwork here. But what I found interesting is that it was security, of course, many years after the Constitution had been ratified, and the painter, allegedly, this is what the diagram says, allegedly painted Abraham Lincoln in the background signing laying down. But what I found interesting is the spirits over it, and you're kind of watching over it, I think again, paintings in the time, painted shortly after the assassination of Lincoln, allegedly, what he did, decades later, what he did, almost like it completed the Constitution. The Constitution was for all, but it really put into practice, kind of watching to Lincoln. This is a speech you are allowed to take a picture of this spot at the National Archive. What Abraham Lincoln, this is his fiery trial speech, because he says that this is making it national for all slavery. He says, in giving freedom to the slave, we assure freedom to the This is a speech you are allowed to take. In giving freedom to the slave, we assure Abraham Lincoln's fiery trial. It's called the fiery trial. He says, because he said, for all, a fiery trial. In giving freedom to the slave, we assure freedom. I'm always thinking of everything I look at is spirituality. Give out freedom to the slave, fiery trial. right? The walnuts are 43 million years. What do they look like? They look like walnuts, right? So again, you see that a lot. You look back in this, what they call this ancient history, millions of years old. The things we find are things that we have 38 today, or under, they're as complex. Looks like a squirrel. See, right? The walnuts are 43 million years. What do they look like? They look like walnuts, right? And the squirrel. You see that a lot. You look back in this, what they call this. Then, of course, there was this awesome area with different schools that have found. Of course, they take each school, and if there's a minor difference, that's going to be something that bigger eyebrows or shorter chin. Then, of course, there was this awesome area. This other arm of evolution. But this woman was actually found on an island that's off of the coast of Indonesia or bigger eyebrow. She lived 50,000 years ago. But she was only 3 feet. This other arm. So because she was short, they said, oh, look. But this type of man was actually short. They were growing and evolving almost as if little people don't exist. Right? Come on, you see that 50,000 years ago. Yeah. We do come in different sizes, don't we? This was really amazing, and I took a lot of pictures of birds, but I need to look at it slowly. But this picture is from a tribe, the Tsimshian tribe, and it's a different that they have passed down over the generations. And I took a lot of pictures of this somewhere, and they fresh out and get it slowly. But this picture is from a tribe, the Tsimshian tribe. It's a story of, you find stories of out of higher and higher and higher until finally it was injected where someone could find it on the planet, on the planet, and just hit it. Okay. So this is the Burns core. Something compressed and very hard to tell. Even the Earth slowly, over millions of years, slowly was pushed out of higher and higher and higher until finally it was. We went to eat while we were heading to eat. Sharon almost got eaten. So I put this picture in here because that's where that's a gentleman, one of the curators that I met here in Yuma. So he's got a section there where he talks a lot about the origins of man. So we got to go and see his exhibit. That piece of that exhibit was here in Yuma when I got to providentially get to meet him and talk about creation. So I put this picture here because that's where he comes. So it's one of the curators. So it was kind of, I got to see his picture. Here's several different pictures of There sure is there. And again, 6 million years ago. But if you find bones of other things like a squirrel 38 million years ago, what does it look like? Squirrel years ago, right? But only 6 million years ago, we're still connected to baboons and apes. We don't have it. And again, something I talk about with singular, like we're just missing one thing. Yet. We haven't found it yet. Like there's this hope. There's one thing we're missing, and it's out there. We haven't found it yet. There's this thing is a lie. Not just because it's not big, because it's missing links. We're talking about millions of things. Because not just humans today, they believe that everything is back to one. Every plant, a tree, animals, and it's out in the ocean. Fits their model. More pictures of skulls in this origin of man's area. Here's some of all the different subsets that they have, of all the different groups that they claim all fit the model. More of those. And of course, as you go back in time, the more animalistic they become, right? Okay? The more they look like apes is what they present to us. Here's Lucy. I really didn't see it at the time. I wish her eyes came out really weird, deformed in the glass. So it looks like she has some massive cyclops eye. But I want you to catch this. We'll go back for a second. I want you to know what they all have in common. Look at the eyes of all these different, they claim, subsets of humanity, right? Look at all the eyes. What do they all have in common is they all have whites of the eyes, right? They all have white eyes. Have we ever found fossilized eyes, like a preserved eye? That's a total guess. They have no idea what an eyeball looks like in these, what they would say is, different subsets of mankind, ancestors of mankind, including the further back you go to where they're ape-like, they still have white eyes. Now, why is that so notable? Do modern gorillas have white eyes? They don't have white eyes. They don't have white eyes. And so they're poisoning our brains with this lie. We've never, ever found a preserved eyeball of any of these beings. And they are telling us, they're poisoning our brain by making us think they're human, that they're human-like. And it's a thing that our students, not our students, but students, hundreds, thousands of students go through every year, and it's telling them subliminally, boy, these are human-like. But we've never found. That's a guess of science, that they had white eyes, or whites of eyes. Same with Lucy. They've got her cyclops eye there. You can see it's white. And so that's a total guess, and really it's a lie if you think about it. They're poisoning our minds with this idea that the further back you go, they're like us, but they're not like us. These are just gorillas. They're just apes. Different types of apes. They're not humanoids. They're not human at all.
I love the expression. Lucy was not actually found together.
Perfect.
3 different layers. She was
yes.
Like an acre or half an acre.
You're absolutely right. They didn't find it all nice and neat, right? And also, and I talk about this in the series, that there are bones that they for decades said were hers, and later said, oh, oops, those actually didn't belong to her. That was a lemur, that was a monkey, that was a squirrel, and they started taking parts away. And of course, the big issue with Lucy is they say, how do you know Lucy was ancient human? They say, look at her feet. Well, guess what we found of her feet? None. You look at the bones that we found, we have no feet. But they say, look at her feet are the proof. Because they say she had human feet and not ape feet. But we never found her feet. The evidence is her feet, and we've never found her feet. So anyway.
I thought they also said her hand.
Opposable thumb, that's also an idea, but I think for her, it was the feet. The evidence is the feet, and there's no feet. We never found her feet. Yeah. We found, there's one of her feet, there's an ankle joint. And they base the rest of the idea off of the ankle joint, what her feet would have looked like. But anyway, well, I thought this was sadly inspirational. Notable, that's the word I'm looking for. It was very notable that as you're leaving the Origin of Men area, they've got this painting as you walk out through this bridge. And it's showing, of course, the stages of humanity. Of course, evolution is saying these are millions of years and we're becoming more human and more civilized, right? We're becoming more intelligent over those years. And the sad thing is the spread of racism. If you really think about this, look at this. And now I've reversed them for the process, but you go from animal to African. And when I say African, they claim the origin of man came from Africa, right? And then Neanderthals, and notice the lighter skin, and where are Neanderthals found? It's Europe. So as we got smarter, as we got more evolved, we got lighter and smarter, and we went to Europe and came out of Africa, right? And so a lot of creationists point that out, that the evolutionary idea has a strong basis in the racism of the 1800s as the science was growing, was this idea that the more civilized we became, the more lighter skinned we became because we became more European and less African. And that's disgusting, of course. Then we came over to the dinosaur area, which was really cool. This picture is notable because it's hard to read, but along the bars here, it shows the whatever it was, the impact that killed off most of the dinosaurs. But then it has kind of the stages of things that happened. And what was notable to me was within days, within weeks, within months, within years, within centuries, and then they get to millions of years. Most of this took place within 100 years is what they're saying, right? In a short time, in other words, right? And so it's just interesting that the evidence shows that whatever took place to kill off most of the dinosaurs happened over a short time period. And they jumped. That's a pretty big jump, isn't it? Days, weeks, months, years, centuries, 1,000,000 years? That's a huge jump to just suddenly go with a missing links in between, right? They don't go to millennia and 10,000 years, 100. It's just a big jump because they're stretching it. There's no proof of the long period. They're stretching it and just throwing it out there based on guesses, on educational guesses. Animals used to be huge. You know that. We have a whole presentation in this series on how huge animals used to be. Of course, that connects with the Bible, yeah? Evolution teaches smaller, then bigger. But as we look back at the record, we see a lot of bigger animals who have gotten shorter over the time. That's the giant sloth. If you want to know how big it was, there's Sharon standing in front of it. Giant sloth. How big is a sloth now? I don't know, this big? So they're not evolving, they're devolving. Everything's shrinking in time, right? Are we shrinking? When we get to heaven, Adam's not going to be 3 feet tall, and we've evolved. He's 15 feet tall or whatever, and we're all have to grow up to his stature, right? This is a remake of it, but this is the flyer, the Wright Flyer, the first flight at Kitty Hawk. And seeing it in person gave me a whole new perspective. I don't know why. I guess I've never even seen a picture of it. I didn't know that they were just laying on it, just chilling, flying it by just laying down. It was pretty cool. You can see that a little better here. He's just laying down, piloting the flight. This was no longer natural history. Of course, we've moved on to the Air and Space Museum. You can see the Apollo 11 command module, and this is Neil Armstrong's actual suit that he wore on the moon with the famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." And what's amazing is that it was just 66 years between them. Kitty Hawk to being on the moon, 66 years between the two. How fast we went from this little wooden rickety thing where he's laying down and piloting it to sending men to the moon. Which, of course, conspiracy theorists will say, that's not possible. We never went to the moon, apparently. And it's just amazing the gifts that God has given us, the intelligence he's given us. Only 66 years to evolve that much. We didn't need millions of years, 66 years. Yes?
Well, it makes you think of Daniel 12 where he says, knowledge shall increase.
Yes, amen. Good point. Knowledge shall increase. Many shall run to and fro, including the moon. It's beautiful.
That first flyer was not mechanical.
No.
They pushed it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Just pushed it off a hill and hoped it went. And it did go, and then they built others, and they started flying them around the world at expos, and there's pictures, videos. Actually, I think we got to see video there of them flying it in Paris and things. So it's pretty cool. But 66 years later, we were walking on the moon. It's amazing. We then went to the American Indian, Native American Museum, which was, of course, for us personally, very meaningful, as my wife is Navajo. A lot of fun. Here is the highest-ranking American Indian in the Union Army during the Civil War, actually. He was a lieutenant colonel. And it says, as General Grant's secretary, he drafted the terms of surrender. Isn't that amazing? I didn't know that a Native American drafted the terms of surrender. A popular story states that Confederate General Robert E. Lee, noticing that Parker was an American Indian, remarked, "I am glad to see one real American here." Parker later recalled, "I shook his hand and said, 'We are all Americans.'" It's beautiful. Here's a quote from a Navajo at they have a section of the different wars and how American Indians worked with Americans, with the American government to fight and participate in these wars. Chester Nez, who fought in World War II and the Korean War, said, "People ask me, why did you go? Look at all the mistreatment that has been done to your people." And his reply was, "Somebody's got to go. Somebody's got to defend this country. Somebody's got to defend the freedom. This is the reason why I went." It's beautiful. It's great. Here's a beautiful sculpture of on the left there is George Washington. This memorializes I really don't know how to say her name, Askenadana, and on our right is Polly Cooper. I'm sorry, maybe she's Polly Cooper in the front, And in the back right is Oscar and Adana, and then on the left is George Washington. At Valley Forge, the American soldiers during the Revolutionary War were starving, literally starving, and Native Americans showed up to feed them and to help them. And I'd have to go through a whole prophecy lesson, but it's interesting that in Revelation 12, talking about the birth of America, it talks about how the earth helped the woman. The woman fled the persecution, and the earth helped the woman. Well, what does dirt represent in Scripture? It's people, right? And so the earth, people helped, and that's true in the Pilgrim story. They fed them as they got off the Mayflower. It's true during the Revolutionary War that they came and fed the soldiers at Valley Forge. It's very true. Bible prophecy is always true, though, right? And we were very, very inspired enough in the American Indian Museum that Sharon decided to go ahead and ask for land back. It didn't work. They just ignored her. So it actually is a painting of a treaty signing between the American government and a native tribe. It was pretty cool to see. Then there was this beautiful area for the Long Walk, which is, you've heard of the Trail of Tears for the Cherokee, mainly the Cherokee people and other tribes as well. But for the Navajo, it's called the Long Walk, when they were walked to Bosque Redondo, which is in eastern New Mexico, and forced into life off of the reservation. And it was Kit Carson, who actually had retired. He was done. This is post-Civil War. He retired from the Army. But the government really wanted the Navajo gone and felt that he could do it. And so they called him out of retirement and made him go and remove many of the Navajo. The Dene is their traditional name. And so he was told, this is General James Carleton's orders to Colonel Kit Carson in 1863. Say to them, go to Bosque Redondo, or we will pursue and destroy you. We will not make peace with you on any other terms. This war will be pursued against you until you cease to exist or move. The promise made to Colonel Kit Carson is if you come back and do this, we will retire you with general leadership. You'll be made a general. And so he came back for that. And I just love the fact, and he did it, he moved them, he was made a general, he retired, he went back to civilian life. And what's amazing to me is that historically, we all still call him Colonel Kit Carson. That's how we know him. And so he did this atrocity for the title, and we don't remember. I didn't even know that he was a general until I read that. Like, we don't call him General Carson. We all still call him historically Colonel Kit Carson. And so he really didn't get what he hoped for. We remember him still as a colonel. So that was his orders. Tell them, you're done. You'll cease to exist or move. What's beautiful is the Navajo had a leader named Barboncito. And Barboncito agrees to go to save his people. He agrees, we're not going to fight you. You have to catch us, but we'll go. If you catch it, we will go peacefully. And so there really aren't wars at that time to capture Navajos. But while there, he immediately enters into treaty mode. He's trying to settle an agreement so that they can go home. And the Navajo end up becoming one of the very few tribes who are allowed to go home, and their reservation is back in their initial spot before they were forced to leave. And one of the things he said, General Sherman was the one who was called in to make the agreement with the treaty. And one of the things that Barboncito says to General Sherman, who is known historically as being very rough, emotional, he doesn't care. Barboncito said this: our grandfathers had no idea of living in any other country except our own. And I do not think it is right for us to do so. And then he says this: our God created it, the land, special for us. And often when you read, and this is something I've done when I lived on the res, you read the treaty agreements and the things. He was very God-centric. He kept telling them, we're not going to fight you. God's against you. God's going to do this. And he gave all that glory to God. Of course, he would call it the Creator, and that's who we worship, the Creator. And so he was very strong, and they moved back. The Navajos were allowed to go back at the end of this time at Bosque Redondo. The original reservation is the maroon box, And this is the Navajo Nation today. And so it's grown since that time. Unfortunately, though, there is a time frame. There is a deadline on the treaty. And all the treaties that were made, there was a deadline. And they are coming up in the next few decades. And the people have no idea what will happen. Will the land be taken back? Will we stay to it? Will we, of course, as Adventists, will we even be here? I have no idea. But one interesting thing I'll mention to you is over here near Albuquerque, you'll see a little spot of the Navajo reservation that exists out there. Those are the families of the people who turned on their own people, who were traitors, who went and helped the armies gather Navajos. And then so when they came back, they said, you're still Navajo, you're still our family, but you can't live here. We don't want you here. And they made them, they got a plot for them to go live out near Albuquerque, kind of as outcasts. And their families still to this day, 100 plus years later, still live out there in that spot. Yeah.
Pastor, I don't know if this is true. I'm remembering we took a tour of Canyon O'Shea, and we were told, at least in the canyon, that the land was given to each family, and they couldn't sell it.
Yes, that's true. You're right. There's rights we're not allowed to sell. Good. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You can apply for more land, but you're right. You cannot sell your land. The Deadman family have their plots, and everyone's got their homes on the plots and the whole bit. Yeah. And you have to apply if you want more. But you're right. There's no real estate. There's no selling land. It just passed down from generation to generation. Yeah. I won't talk about this tonight, but here is the basilica that we'll talk about. On March 29th is when we'll film that. The Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. If you don't know, Immaculate Conception isn't about Jesus. That phrase is used about Mary. They believe Mary was born sinless, part divine, part human, and born sinless. And so this whole basilica has just a lot of stories, a lot of shrines, and it was really, really fascinating. But we'll film that later on in March. Then we went to the Museum of the Bible. By the way, in case you have things to do or whatever, I am trying to go as fast as I can with this without being too quick. We're at slide 72 of 120. So we've made good progress, but we still got a ways to go. We went to the Museum of the Bible, which was really fascinating. They're just not far from the National Mall. Christians have put together, and Jews and Christians have put together this beautiful Museum of the Bible. This is an idol of Baal on the left. An idol of Asherah. You see those terms in the Bible, of course. The sun god is Baal. The moon god is Asherah. God and goddess, I should say. Over here are Egyptian gods also. But what's interesting about all these idols is that they're just this big. They're tiny because they were individual idols that you would take in your pocket as good luck. You would carry your idols with you, and wherever you carried them, that was to provide good luck. And of course, prophetically, as you follow the doctrine, you can go from Egypt to Babylon to Persia to Greece to Rome to papal Rome. And what it has become today are the prayer cards, the saint prayer cards that are carried around in your wallets or things if you happen to be Catholic and you carry those around. It's just the same doctrine that's been taught and changed over the years, but same thing that's been passed down. Yes. Gods were not transferable. Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. But in my mind, when you talk about idols, you read idol in the Bible, you're always picturing, idols. Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar's idol, right? But it was just cool to they're little ones that people would carry around for good luck. A picture of seals from over the ages, and they all have the same formula. So you go back to Bible days, and you go to the White House Museum, and they all have the same formula for a seal. It tells you who it is and what they have power over and where they're from, right? And just as the Sabbath, the seal of God does, right? So when John wrote the seal of God and mark of the beast, which has the same meaning, he would understand. We don't really understand maybe the same idea of seals today, but in the Bible mindset, they would totally understand what that meant. Oh yeah, the seal. That's the thing you stamp that says who you are, what authority you have, and where you're from. And so it would make a lot of sense. This is actual stone from the Temple Mount. This is from Jerusalem in the time of Christ. He could have leaned against that to tie a sandal strap or something at some point. Who knows? It was pretty cool. There's this amazing room there in the Museum of the Bible where it has all the different languages in the world and all the examples of the Bible for each of those languages. And then it has empty spots, of course, for languages that we're still translating the Bible into. And Sharon is pointing to Diin Gad Bezad, which is the Navajo Bible, and Diin Gad Bezad means the holy words of God, which for me makes more sense than the word Bible. I mean, I know what the word Bible means. It means book, but I like the idea that it's the holy words of God. It's not just a book. It's the holy words of God. I like that. Then we got to see, I mean, it took an hour to go through this section. There are so many leftover fragments of translations for the last, 2,000 years. Well, further back with the Old Testament, but 2,000 years of the New Testament. There's just so much proof. And of course, we understand, I mean, I can't and you can't, but there are scholars who understand what it says, and we can test to see what the Bible said, what the book of Romans said 2,000 years ago, 1,900 years ago, and what it says today, and see that the translation's the same. The Bible hasn't changed over the years, right? Just like the Dead Sea Scrolls. You can see what the book of Daniel, the book of Isaiah said, and nothing has changed over all these years, other than small changes, capital letter or whatever, but the words mean and say the same. It's beautiful. This is the model of the Cyrus cylinder, which proved the story of 2 Chronicles, the prophecy of Isaiah, and the story of Daniel true, because, of course, God through Isaiah prophesies that a redeemer will come named Cyrus. Of course, this is 80 years, 100 years before Cyrus even existed, that a redeemer will come named Cyrus who will send my people back to take their religion back and build a house. 2 Chronicles tells us that historical story. And then here we find the Cyrus cylinder, which is actually from Cyrus. This is just a model of it. But it actually states on there. It's a cylinder written by Cyrus, and it says, or at least the words are of Cyrus, that tells people, go home. I've freed you, go home, take your religious items, and go build your God's homes back where you came from. And so it proved that the Bible was true. It's not just stories we tell, but archaeology proves it to be true. This is an actual cylinder from Nebuchadnezzar. And so that is actually from his time. That's not a model of it. And what he is doing on this cylinder is boasting about the great things he has done, which seems funny because of Daniel 4, where he's boasting about the great things he's done and is struck like an animal, right, before looking up to the heavens and being redeemed yet again. From there, we went off to the African American Museum, which was really inspirational, of course. This is a banner that was used in marches for better education in black communities, lifting as we climb. That was a big push that we want better education. There was a war memorial for African Americans. 165,000 African Americans served in the Navy during World War II. This is, of course, Colin Powell's uniform. And then, of course, the Buffalo Soldiers on the right. The Buffalo Soldiers worked with Teddy Roosevelt in the Spanish-American War. And the sad thing is that he gave them glory. He said, they did great. I love them. But when he became president, he actually passed some laws that would restrict veterans, African-American veterans, from getting benefits and things. But at the time when he was using them, he appreciated their hard work at San Juan Hill. This is Dr. Ben Carson. Heard his name? Know him? This is a section about him. We'll come back to his section here in a little bit near the end. Robert Churchwell, the Jackie Robinson of journalism, the first African American to be hired as a journalist to what was known, of course, at the time as a white newspaper. Charles Alston is quoted here. He was a painter, an artist, and he said, I don't believe there's such a thing as black art, though there's certainly been a black experience. I've lived it, but it's also an American experience. That doesn't mean we've all experienced the same thing, but it's all a part of the American experience. And that's beautiful. Then we flew from D.C. up to Cincinnati and then drove down to Williamsburg or Williamstown, Kentucky, where we actually decided to take a day off. We were exhausted. Our feet hurt. We had blisters. So we took Friday off and just sat around the hotel or the Airbnb for a while, and then spent Sabbath walking through Noah's Ark. And then Sunday we went to the Creation Museum before flying home Sunday night. This is basically an exact replica outside. On the inside, and I'll show you a picture in a bit, they take license. We don't know what it looked like inside, but here's what we think. And they try to stick to scientific models and stats, and then the whole bit, I'll get into that. But outside, this is an exact replica of what it looked like. And it was much larger than I think I had pictured in my head. It was pretty big. Then, of course, before we went into it, Sharon and I decided to take a family picture. We had a family reunion with our grandfathers outside. That's Noah and Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and we had a good time catching up with them. Here's a picture. I tried to get a picture that showed how tall it was. It was pretty How many of you have been there to see it? Wow, only a couple of us, so that's amazing. You definitely, if you have an opportunity, definitely go and see it.
One came from New Zealand for that.
New Zealand, yeah, that's right. I did remember that. I did remember seeing that. And so I can't really read it probably from where you're sitting, but what this graph said, or what this information said, was that they took a worst case scenario in trying to figure out what it would have looked like inside. In other words, there's a lot of easier ways to do things, much more intelligent ways. But even if it was a worst case scenario and they didn't do a good job building it, you could still fit everything inside and survive. So that's what they did. Now, that doesn't mean that that's how they built it inside, but they decided, because they're inviting atheists to come in, they don't want to present the best idea, like where they're sitting in lazy boys and relaxing the whole time. If it was hard work, and if they didn't have time, and if they built it in some unintelligent ways, if they just did their best, this is what it would have looked like inside. And it's comfortable, it still worked great, and they still could have easily survived and fit all the animals on board. So this is an area that they said where small animals could have been kept. Here they have a diagram of all the different animals that would have been on the ark, and they tried to over-exaggerate that number. Again, worst case scenario. They believe it's only this amount of animals that would have needed to be on the ark, but just in case they needed this amount, that still could have fit on the ark, and they show you how that all could have fit. In other words, they didn't have pugs, chihuahuas, Great Danes. They had 2 dogs, right? 2 wolves, who then have become all the different breeds. And so, but again, they tried to still do a worst case scenario. If it was this many, we still could have fit all that on the ark, no matter what. They also have some pretty cool areas as you go around. You'll see areas of how they got light in, how they got fresh air in, how clean water would have worked, how waste removal would have worked, both liquid waste removal and solid waste removal, how it all would have easily worked, even if it was primitive. Now, of course, most Bible students don't believe it would have been primitive because they were smart and were devolving. But even if it was primitive understanding of science and construction, they still could have done it in this way. Worst case scenario. This is ventilation, how ventilation would have worked. As water was pushing in, the water was collecting air and by force pushing the air throughout the whole ark. It was really cool to see that. Here we are standing by the door that of course is modeled after the door that the angels would have shut as they entered into the ark and kept them safe inside. And here, what I really appreciated was here they had a big informational board inviting people to salvation. Jesus is the great door, because this is evangelistic. It's a tool. They build it for the atheist mind. Even though we all appreciate it and learn a lot, they built it for the atheist mind to call them to repentance, to believe that these stories are true. A big push throughout both the Creation Museum and Noah's Ark is the idea of, can we trust the Bible? That's the whole purpose, is trying to prove that the Bible is trustworthy. Sharon hung back out with her great-grandfather, Shem. Native Americans would have been from Shem. Europeans would have been Japheth, likely. And African Americans would have been Ham. Africans would have been from the lineage of Ham. But here's Sharon hanging out with Shem over here. Lots of great information throughout. Which planet suffered a massive catastrophic flood? It examines the Earth. It examines the moon. Secular science teaches that the moon had a global flood, but the Earth did not have a global flood. Whereas all the science proves that the moon doesn't have water and didn't have a global flood, and the Earth, of course, had a global flood. Secular science is desperate to prove the Bible untrue. Here's what I was getting to earlier. Remember, at the Smithsonian, it's as if the Bible doesn't exist. It's as if the science of the Bible doesn't exist. But when you go to Noah's Ark and the Creation Museum, it often presents both ideas. Because what do we all look at? We don't have different evidence. It's not like creation say, look at this evidence, and secular science says, look at this evidence. We all say, look at this evidence, right? And then we have different perspectives of that evidence. And so we didn't hide. Creationists don't hide behind it. We say, okay, here's the evidence. Here's what seculars believe. Here's the Bible, what it believes. And then it goes to prove why the Bible is correct. And it's often something, a life lesson, right? When you know you have the truth, you're not scared of the errors or discussing them or facing them or discussing controversial, right? Adventists don't hide behind Sabbath verses and ignore the verses about Sunday, right? We talk about what those verses mean. We have no qualms with that. When you have the truth, you're not scared of the lie. You can easily point out why the truth is the truth and the lie is the lie. So I really appreciate it that they presented both. A whole section on the Ice Age and how it perfectly fits with the Bible's model. And I appreciate it because this was part of my series. And I'm like, oh, cool, I got it right. Because I'm not a scientist, right? I'm just a pastor and a historian looking at science and trying to figure it out. And I thought, oh yeah, I taught all those in the series. So that was nice to see. This was a cool model of the origin of languages. It's proving on the evolutionary side, or it's showing on the evolutionary side, if we all evolved from one common source, where does language come from? Language will come from one source, which means all the languages should have a beginning, meaning we should all have some connections, some words that still have been passed down, right? Like if you know Latin, you can also understand a lot of French, you can understand a lot of Spanish, you can understand a lot of Italian, because those are Latin languages, right? And so if we all come from one spot, we should have words and meanings that all go back to one. But what do we actually have in language? We have dozens and dozens and dozens of languages that don't connect. So what does that prove? It proves the story of Babel true, because it was just instantaneously dozens of languages, or however many languages instantly, right? There are tower stories. We deal with this in our series as well. Tower stories from all over the world. Dragon stories from all over the world. We also dealt with that in our series. A lot of fun. And then it shows how many people would have been alive on the earth at the time of the flood. And of course, again, they show a worst case scenario. If the population had a 1.4% growth per year, there would have been 19 billion people on the earth at the time of the flood. If it was 1.1%, it would have been 147 million. So only 0.3 makes a massive change. And then in the section there, it says why it was probably one of the lower numbers. That probably wasn't 19 billion, but more. I think it says 1.2 was more likely, which was just under 1 billion people on the earth when the flood occurred. Here is something, though, that caught my eye, of course, as an Adventist. They get to a section where they're talking about the meats that they were allowed to eat when they got off the ark. And it said here, and again, their theme is, can you trust the Bible? There are hundreds of Bible verses all throughout the whole experience. Everywhere you look, there's a Bible verse. Everywhere you look, Bible, 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 Bible. Then they have this sentence. It says, where do I want to start? His covenant with the Israelites at Mount Sinai, but the New Testament shows that these restrictions on meat, were not intended for a certain people at a certain time. But do you catch something what's missing from this paragraph? Huh? I'm sorry, were intended. You're right. But do you notice what's missing from that paragraph? No Bible verses. Everywhere you look, there's Bible verses, but then they try to show you that you can eat unclean meats. No Bible verse. Nothing there. At one point, I got to sit down and listen to a Ken Ham presentation in person. Absolutely fascinating. It was such a good presentation. I'll share pieces of it. We are doing International Sabbath in March. Again, we missed it last year. Went right past me in the schedule, and I missed it. I'm sorry about that, but we're going to do it again this year, and I'll present some of the things I learned. But it was really, really cool. He basically had a presentation on race and the Bible. And it was absolutely fascinating. Really good stuff. They had, of course, models of dinosaurs all over the place. But I love this sign. It says, "Keep our animals healthy. Do not feed the animals." They're just plastic dinosaurs. So again, you'll see 3 sections, 3 different things I took pictures of. Did dinosaurs and humans coexist? Was there a global flood? Are humans and apes related? And then you'll notice secular view, Bible view. Everywhere you looked, we were not scared. Creationists are not scared of presenting the secular view. Here's the Bible view, but here's why the Bible is right. It was just really cool. I did not know that this was at the, I think we're at the Creation Museum now. I didn't know this was at the Creation Museum. I've always wanted to see this. This is just one of my favorite fossils. I've seen it in books. I've seen it on the internet 100 times. To finally get to see it was cool. That is, excuse me, one fish eating another fish and fossilized in the moment. Rapid burial? Rapid burial, very rapid burial. He didn't even get a chance to swallow it. Absolutely proving the Bible, more evidence of the Bible to be true. Sorry, I got something caught in my throat. It's a fossil of a horseshoe crab on the right. But why this is notable is if you can see it where you're sitting, you can actually see his tracks, or her tracks, sorry, of where this horseshoe crab went. And the burial was so rapid that even the tracks were preserved in the rock or in the sand. Pretty amazing. These two were swimming side by side, crossing over each other. Boom, rapid burial fossilized, right? Or the process of fossilization began. But rapid burial, right there, quickly. Yeah, can I? Thank you.
Were their fin or their gills flared in that last picture?
Were their gills what?
Their gills flared. Usually when they're rapid burial like that, it'll look like they're.
Good question. I can't tell. But definitely rapid burial. He was just cry. He was just enjoying his day. La ti da, right? Quick. So remember back at the Smithsonian, you find a skull like this, and then they tell us that that skull is going to look like this, right? We don't find the skin, we don't find the fat, we don't find the muscles. All the whole makeup of what was on the skull is total guess by a scientist of what it looked like, right? But when we start to put these skulls in computers and let AI tell us what these skulls would have looked like, look at the guy. Does he look like a half man, half ape? Just looks like a human. And so there's blessings and curses in everything, especially in technology. There are blessings and curses even with AI. But there are some beautiful blessings here when the AI says, oh, that skull? Yeah, this is what it would have looked like. Not half man, half ape at all. Right? And so, so this is just showing the different types of what secular science says that these skulls could have looked like. If the skull was an orangutan, that's what it looked like. If it was a gorilla, that's what it looked like. If it was an ape man, it's what it looked like. And then the head at the top is actually what the AI says it would have looked like, which is just not half man, half ape, just a regular-looking monkey. So you find a skull, and you let a computer tell you what it would have looked like had it had flesh and bone, flesh and blood, and it's just an animal. It's not half man, half human. Then we went further back and saw our original great-grandfather. We got to hang out with Adam and Eve for a little bit. They've got this beautiful walkway underground that you walk at the Creation Museum where you walk through the stories of Genesis 1 through 11. And it's just really cool, really beautiful. This is a cool picture to notice that, The Smithsonian did not do this. It did not. It has a whole model, let's say, of a dinosaur. Most of it is reproduction. It's clay. They just come up with it. But when the Creation Museum had a dinosaur model, underneath it would be a picture, well, here, and it would show you what actual bones were discovered and which ones are guessed. And so again, Creation Museum was not trying to hide anything. It was letting you know all the facts from both sides. But there were some things, and I've got just a few more slides. I'll try to wrap up quickly. There were some things that the Creation Museum did try to hide. In fact, one particular thing it tried to hide. As you walk around Noah's Ark, as you walk around the Creation Museum, you constantly see the Sabbath either ignored or relegated. And in fact, I said the word Sabbath. You'll never see the word Sabbath, or you won't see the word Sabbath at either of these places. They always just call it day 7. And so you have all these pictures and things, and then day 7, just a little underline underneath.
And there is another place, but they have a plaque for each of the days of the
It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. I promise. The picture's here. And also in Washington, D.C., every museum you go in, they would talk at times about Buddhists, Hindi, Mormons. There's a whole, I'm getting ahead of myself. But anything where Adventists could have come up? Never. Ben Carson, I read every single word on the Ben Carson Memorial. Never once mentioned he was a Seventh-day Adventist. That was at the African American Museum. Here's a section on Methodism. So you see Methodists in there. Here's a whole section on Mormonism. On the left side, on the right side, a section about Baptists. You saw stuff about Catholicism. But never once ever did I ever see the term Seventh-day Adventist in any museum. And don't we play an integral part in American history? I mean, a lot of Adventists have played an integral part. You never see anything. And even again, when you see an Adventist like Ben Carson, you don't see that term anywhere in his section. And here's the section you're talking about. It's hard. The angle's not quite right. I have another picture that will show you a little better. Each section has these big, beautiful paintings of the days of the week. This is back at the Creation Museum. This is Noah's Ark. Big section, this big, beautiful thing. And then you go over to day 7, it's just a few words. And it's hard to tell. You can't tell from this angle. I actually took too good of a picture because it looks like each one has a spot. Days 1 through 6 are actually a little bigger, and they're tilted in a way so they're kind of highlighted. And then day 7 is actually hidden behind day 6 and flat on the wall. And I'm glad that I have other people who are like, yeah, you're right, because it's hard to see it in the picture. It really is. But in person, you're like, oh, wow, it's kind of hidden behind day 6 and flat on the wall with no beautiful pictures, no picture of Jesus and Adam and Eve together, spending the time together, just a few words.
And what it says is really kind of not all that.
It's bland, isn't it? I thought the same thing. It's bland. And you don't see the word Sabbath anywhere. Nowhere there. Here is a puzzle that they sell in the gift shop. Anything missing from the puzzle? Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, 5, day 6, puzzle's over. Just day 7's not there on there. So it was just interesting to see as we went through both the secular worldview, and then we're like, okay, cool. We saw lots of Bible stuff and lots of proof of young earth, and you felt relegated at both places. It's like you didn't exist to them, and you don't exist to them, and the Sabbath truth. It's a creation museum. You'd think they'd have a whole section on the Sabbath and time with God, and never. You don't. And like I said, I think I saw the word Sabbath once on a small chart, like down in the corner, and it was from Matthew. It actually was just talking about the Sabbath in a story of Jesus. It wasn't actually talking about the Sabbath itself in creation. Yeah. And then our last picture, that was us as we were leaving the Creation Museum on our way back to the airport so we could fly home. We had a wonderful, wonderful time. I hope you had a good time tonight. Sorry it ran an hour and 20, but a lot of good information, I hope, and a good journey. If you get a chance to ever go to Noah's Ark, Creation Museum, please take that chance. It was an amazing time. Nonetheless, even if they ignore the Sabbath, it was still a cool time. So let me send you out with prayer. Father, thank you so much for the fact that the Bible can be trusted. We spent days in Washington, D.C., clearly being able to see the lies of evolution, clearly being able to see that the truth of your word, even if they ignore your word, the truth is still hidden there. It's still, actually, not hidden, it's right there, right before our very eyes. And then we can go to the Creation Museum and see such beautiful proof that you certainly are our creator. Guide us this week into a new week. Be our creator each day. Recreate in us a good heart, a clean heart. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Thanks, everybody. God bless you. Have a good week. Yeah, that was really cool. Sharon, anything you want to say before we close? Any stories? I'm just teasing you.